Incoming transmission.
Apologies, my co-host who's normally with me couldn't be here today. He's caught the dreaded winter flu, unfortunately.
That's the worst.
But he did ask me to pass on that he absolutely adores the Shangri-La design and the Enterprise G. He was always a big fan of that.
Well, thank you. Thanks to him from me.
Yeah, we actually have video proof of that because we did a top 10 Starships episode a while ago on the podcast, and he did include what at the time what we thought was the Titan A because the series hadn't finished, it hadn't been rechristened as the Enterprise, and it was still on his list of top 10 ships in the franchise. So he's a fan. Hello there, faithful viewers, and welcome back to another special episode of the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast. I am a regular host and your host for this one, Captain Michael Wilson, and this is another special episode. It's not a review or anything. It's another one of our semi-regular interviews with people of interest or notable folk from within the Star Trek universe. This one is an interview that I conducted just a few days ago with Bill Krause. Now, if you're not familiar with Bill Krause, he is a model maker and a video photography producer from Ohio in the USA. He's been making models for years, initially as a fan of various franchises, including Star Trek. And he's been working in the Star Trek universe since 2018. He started out making digital images and various things for the Star Trek Ships of the Line calendars. He's contributed to that every year since 2018, up to and including 2024's version of the calendar. And in the process of sort of contributing stuff for that and his own physical models, which he tends to prefer, he has reproduced models of starships and things from the various Trek franchises, but he's also come up with designs for ships that didn't previously exist that would fit into that world that he comes up with himself. And in the process of that, one of the ships that he came up with was the USS Wasp, or the Wasp class, sometimes called the USS Hornet or the Wasp Interceptor. It's a design that he sort of refined from another place, but it was a design that he eventually would refine into the USS Intrepid, the Duderstadt class in Star Trek Picard Season 3. Lots of other things that he's worked on, but perhaps most notably, he came up with another class called the Shangri-La class, which, if you see it, and hopefully I'll be able to pop it on screen, is quite clearly the forebear of the Constitution 3 class that would become the Titan A and, importantly, the Enterprise G in Star Trek Picard. So Bill is basically the father of the new Starship Enterprise, which is a pretty big deal and a pretty noble thing to be able to say on your CV, I would think. So, I spent the interview just chatting with Bill about how he got started, his introductions to Star Trek, what it was like being hired initially for Ships of the Line and then to work on Star Trek Picard, how these kind of ship designs went and such. And hopefully it makes for an entertaining and informative interview. So without any further ado, I'm going to cross over to myself. I had to conduct this interview on my own because, unfortunately, my regular co-host DK was unwell. He's been crippled a little bit with the dreaded winter flu, unfortunately, so he wasn't able to make it. But hopefully, I've held the fort quite well with some interesting questions. So, hopefully you'll enjoy this interview. And, over to me and Bill Krause. So, welcome back to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast. I am your regular host, Michael Wilson, on camera here. And I'm joined for an interview by a legend somewhat in the Star Trek circles, a Starship designer, model maker, a video and photography producer, and among other things, the co-designer of the Enterprise G, Mr. Bill Krause. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Thanks for taking the time, and I appreciate you coming and chatting with us. I have a few questions that I've put together for you, if it's okay. So I'm going to just jump straight in and say that the first question we always ask all of our guests is,
what was your introduction to Star Trek? It's always fascinating to learn. Was there a moment that you just can picture that you were hooked on the franchise and you enjoyed it? And in your case, was there a moment that specifically triggered your interest in the ships?
I was introduced to Star Trek when it was in syndication, the original series back in the early 70s. I was a little too young to have seen it when it first aired in the late 60s, but I caught it in its first run of syndication, which played, I think, on Saturday afternoons. And myself and my neighbors watched it regularly, and we all dressed up. At that time, we can get like a T-shirt that had the Star Trek logo. Here I am wearing one right now, but we all played Star Trek in the street in the backyard back in the 70s, and that was how I got introduced to Star Trek. But of course, starships themselves being another character of the show was something I had always loved, and being a model maker and having that access to build models of the show from the show was a great thing to be doing back then.
Awesome. I know that we've talked about it at length on the podcast, but I think for me and for my co-host, we probably would say the moment that we fell in love with the ship designs was the motion picture, that first gorgeous shot of the refit Enterprise, which isn't to say that we didn't love the original Matt Jeffries design, but it's just, we think that was basically like you improved on perfection. And right. Was that a similar experience for you when you saw, because a lot of your models are from that era?
Oh, for sure. I mean, when you saw Star Trek when it was airing on TV, it was just, a blurry kind of image that just swooped right past, the camera, and you couldn't really get a good look at it. And when you saw it in the motion picture, you saw it huge, up close. It was real, and you saw every little detail and hull panel and bolt. And at that moment, it was like a real ship, and you kind of fell in love with it from that point. So, and it felt real, and that's when I think I fell in love with starships. I think even more so than original series.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. So how did you get started designing your own ships and constructing such detailed, sort of gorgeous models?
When I got back into the hobby again, after having spent a lot of time with going through college and getting married and having kids and all that, and I had more free time to devote to my hobby, and I just had this kind of like built up, pent up anxiety for designing something different and something new, and just not building another Enterprise kit, because everyone had Enterprise kits, and I wanted to build something that kind of no one else had, and wanted to see more of other portions of the fleet that you may not have seen in the original show. And I think when we saw the Reliant in Star Trek II, you realize, oh, there's more ships out there than just the Enterprise. So I had this kind of idea, well, what are other classes of ships look like? What do scouts and destroyers and light cruisers and all that kind of things look like? So I started thinking of ideas to build other starships. And I think the Shangri-La was one of the first ones that I had built back in 2014, getting back in the hobby, and just kind of had some rough sketches and ideas of things I wanted to kind of experiment with. And I think it was inspired by a set of fan blueprints called the USS Hornet. And it featured like this cutout hull, primary hull. And I thought, well, I can use that for my next design. And that was what inspired that hull shape at that time. And that Hornet eventually became, as you know, as the Intrepid and Neuterstadt. But back then, these are blueprints from like the mid 1980s. By a guy named Larry Miller. He had done this ship called the Hornet, which had this kind of stinger hull. And I was really pretty cool. So I eventually made a model of my version of that called the Wasp, but at the same time as I did the Shangri-La. So the Shang and Wasp were kind of like sister ships for me. And then now you see them in Picard as Titan and Intrepid. But back 10 years ago, they were just some model I had built for fun.
Yeah, but they're fantastic. They fit perfectly into the lineage of the show, and you can tell that there's some genuine kind of care and attention that's gone into it. All of your models look like they are straight off the screen, I will say, and the designs themselves are fantastic. I'm a huge Starship nerd, not as much as my co-host, who I mentioned off screen. He's a huge fan of the Shangri-La design back in the day. He has some really obscure kind of FASA role-playing Star Trek knowledge that I don't have, so he knows all about these really bizarre looking ships that they had on there. And he did ask me to ask you if you ever played any of those, and were you aware of like the Starship designs that you could make out of this for yourself?
I'd played the FASA, I think it was called Starfleet Battles, back in the early 80s. And you're just kind of just given kind of TOS era ships to play with. And it's kind of a strategy game with moving ships around the board with against opponents, but there was not much in the way of unique design. It was just there's a Federation ship, there's a Klingon ship, there's a Romulan ship, and then that's what you got to play with. And so, other than looking at other fan designs that were just being produced unofficially, looking for different ideas, that was what I think it really inspired me to do my own stuff, was seeing what other people were doing rather than what was being done officially at the time. So I think there are people who are afraid, I think, of kind of creating outside the box. I feel like a lot of the facet designs, they kind of just rearrange the existing components. Here's your primary saucer, here's your secondary hull, here's some engines, and you kind of rearrange them in different configurations. Okay, here's another ship. There's another ship.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing. So just kind of rearranged differently. And I kind of thought, well, I should introduce a little bit, some other kind of design language that would kind of create my own look and feel, but still look Star Trek. So
yeah, sure. I think that's one of the things that I noticed, that, like I said, it's of a lineage in terms of the actual show, but it is very much its own thing. And you mentioned the Wasp Interceptor, which became the Dudestat class, the Intrepid, which by all accounts shouldn't necessarily work because it doesn't seem to have a secondary hull, and yet for some reason the silhouette and everything and the way you designed it just really fits.
Yeah, they don't all have to have the same amount of components as the Enterprise. I mean, and every ship has got its own specific mission and profile. So, I mean, as long as it's got 2 engines and some place to hold the crew, that's all you need. You can configure the hull and the engines however you want. It doesn't have to have the same things that the Enterprise did. So, and the Wasp was something that it was unique in the fact that it had a sort of a secondary hull. It was kind of like a cylinder that was below the primary. It wasn't as big as a standard secondary hull, but it still had a function. And it's a different ship, so it required a different look. So awesome. That's what it was.
So yeah, obviously you have Tycho Shipyards now, and I was just curious how that kind of got started as a business, and what was the process like of kind of starting that and growing it over the years, and making your hobby into something that would provide cash, I guess.
Yeah, I think part of my my internal canon was to create a fictional shipyard. So I'm sitting here working on these models every single day, and I'm building one after another. And suddenly I'm trying to think outside. Okay, if this were a real shipyard, where is it? What's it called? You know, and so I just kind of like my own headcanon created this Tycho Yard thing. And a lot of my Star Trek aesthetic borrows from 2001: A Space Odyssey. So Tycho was part of the 2001 where they discovered the monolith on the moon in Tycho crater. They called it TMA-1. So I thought, well, that'd be kind of a cool place to build a shipyard on the moon, either in orbit or in the crater. But it's Tycho Shipyard, and it's kind of in that kind of universe, but in the future.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of 2001. Talk about borrowing from the classics. That's yeah, awesome. Didn't even put that connection together, but now that you mention it, I can definitely see it. Yeah.
People think it's part of what's that other TV show, Expanse, which also uses Tycho, but it's not related to that. Mine was before that.
Yeah, that's okay. Haven't watched that, but I do mean to at some point. I keep getting told I would enjoy it. So yeah, the next question was, your first official work for the Star Trek franchise was as a contributor to the Star Trek Ships of the Line calendars, which I'm a huge fan of. Basically, how did that come about? And it must have been a thrill to get the official, the word you're working on an official Star Trek product.
Oh, for sure. I think it was about 2017. I'd been posting a lot of my Starship and models on my Facebook and social media. I took a photo of my finished model and I composite against a background or a space background, and then got noticed by Doug Drexler, who was editing and putting together the calendars, and asked if I would want to contribute to the next calendar. I go, sure. And I think it was the Wasp that was the first composite that I did for that. And it was something I had done on my own, and he really liked it. So he basically wanted that for the calendar. And I've been doing it ever since. So it's been now probably 8 or 9 years been working on this.
Yeah.
So it's always a thrill to be asked.
Sorry. One of the things I love about it is that there seems to be kind of an almost ongoing universe in those Ships of the Line calendars. And when I was researching you, I obviously found out which ones it was that you specifically contributed. And you can kind of tell they're all of a type. And they were almost all my favorites from the sort of the Wasp interceptor shot, or the various enemies at the gates, I think it was called, was another, or up to like the Javelin shuttle, which is gorgeous. So is there a like with your sort of Tycho shipyard business, is there a headcanon that you have where you kind of play out all of these things that your ships are doing and then come up with a picture that would capture that for the calendar? Or is it just like, oh, I'll just do this on the day?
It depends on the calendar year. I mean, sometimes Doug has a theme in mind. He'll tell all the other contributors, like, this is what we're going to do this year. And so it's either, this picture basically has to tell a story in at first glance. And it's not just a pretty picture of a ship flying through space. There's something going on. And so you want some sort of action or some sort of something happening in the composition rather than just a pretty starship shot. So not all years are like that. Sometimes you just like something that you've done, and he'll let you do whatever you want, and he'll say yes or no, or try again. Luckily, I've been pretty fortunate that he likes them pretty much out of the gate. So
yeah,
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I think they would. I mean, I would have loved just to chat to you off the back of that.
Mhm.
But having said that, that obviously led to coming to work on Star Trek Picard, on the actual TV series.
Yeah,
Which again, that has to have been a sort of a huge moment for you. And
absolutely. Yeah.
according to my research, if it's correct, that was because you were kind of found by Doug Drexler and John Eves at Wonderfest when you were sort of displaying your models, and they kind of put your name forward. Is that more or less accurate?
More or less. I mean, Doug's never been to Wonderfest. He knew me just through my artwork and through Ships of the Line. But John Eves is more of a model maker himself, and he's been a guest and a judge at Wonderfest where I display my models. And I've kind of known him before that, and he and I have been basically fans of each other's work online as well as in person. And I think he's been trying to get me involved in the show in some way. And it was, I think, season 1 of Picard. He had me put together a portfolio of my work to show the producers for whatever work that they wanted me to do. And they didn't need me for that for season 1. But when season 2 rolled around, there was a whole new production staff with a new showrunner, a new art director with Dave Blass and Terry Metalis. And Doug had, and actually John had, I think, been in conversation with them about some ship ideas and was trying to sell them on the idea of a self-illuminated registry on a starship rather than spotlights. Because now we're in the 25th century, and we don't need physical spotlights to aim down onto painted letters on the ship. We can actually have glowing letters on the surface of the ship, like we have in storefronts and at the mall. So they all, I think, collectively looked at my stuff on Instagram or wherever they were directed to. And then I think Dave had saw that I can build models. So he was interested primarily in me building models for season 2 of Picard. And of course, the Stargazer model, the gold-plated ones for the back of the radio room set. And while I was working on that, they asked me also to design a third ship, which would have been the predecessor to the original Stargazer, the Constellation class. But they wanted a TOS version of that. And that's kind of like my ballpark. So it's like, yes, I'm not going to not only get to build models for the show, but actually design one that you may or may not see. But this is with getting my feet wet into the show. And that was great fun.
Well, those of us who are as nerdy as me, we definitely saw, because that was going to be my next question, was that although you weren't credited, you did the gold models for the Stargazer lineage and then for the Titan lineage in season 3 as well. And in both cases, you had to do a model that wasn't ever seen on screen, but you would basically be adding that model to canon because it's visual evidence, it's there. Was that daunting, and how did you decide what class of ship you would use for those?
Well, for the Titan, they weren't quite sure they were going to have gold-plated models on the wall. They had a limited budget, and they originally asked me to build them a gold Titan once I got approved. And I gave them a price, and they're like, well, maybe we'll just do some Eagle Moss toys. I go, all right, that's up to you. But it was maybe 2 weeks before they were actually ready to start shooting. They're like, we need Titan models on this wall. I'm like, can you build one? It's like, yeah. So they sent me over the digital file of the Titan once I got through that process, because I can talk about that later. But that digital model, is not ready to be printed. When you get the digital model from Visual Effects, they're not print ready, and there's no way I could have done this in 2 weeks. I had to scratch build the Titan model. They were thinking, well, we also need ships to fill out the wall. There's space here for 3 models. What do you have laying around we can use as the predecessor for the Titan? So they were not even concerned as to what that would be or what it would look like.
Okay.
And I had been working on the Shangri-La model for Terry because he really liked the Shangri-La. That's how I got selected as the Titan. So I had been building him this kind of mock-up, which I called the Mark II. And that became the mock-up for the Titan. So it was just sitting there on the desk, already ready to be painted. I said, well, how about using the Shangri-La as the predecessor to the Titan? They were like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Like, you think? So that was already done. So that just had to be, sent over along with, I had to scratch build the Titan for that one. Then they were like, well, wait, we needed the Luna for to fill out this legacy. They were not even thinking about that at all at that point. And I'm thinking, really? I mean, that would be like, should be before this other.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they had not even considered it. And I'm like, wow. So they were on their own to do that. And I think they had to get the model from Eagle Moss, and they printed that themselves. But there was almost not going to be a Luna on the wall at all. And I'm like,
wow. I would imagine they probably spoke to Sean Durango about it, because I think he's the kind of keeper of that design, really. But
yeah.
So you weren't responsible for the Luna class one that's on the
not
ship.
For that one, no. Then they asked me, like, well, I'm already busy trying to get this other one done in a week and a half. So I didn't have the model for it, and they were able to get it. So they just did it themselves.
Fair enough. On a related topic to that, I know almost nothing about the actual construction of the models. I love them, and I love to look at them and have them on display, but I don't know anything about making them. And I was just curious, when it comes to situations like that, is it more difficult to reproduce an existing sort of class design more accurately, or to have one of your own designs like the Shangri-La when it was first produced, or the Wasp from scratch, Well,
luckily I'd saved some of the parts of the components of the models were cast, and I had the molds for those. They were pretty old, so I refurbished those. So I was able to remold parts of the original Shangri-La to recreate the Titan and the Shangri-La as well. So those were already ready to go. It's pretty quick for me to do that, since I have those parts in front of me on the workbench. I can be molding and casting and creating them right away, as opposed to getting a digital file where I've got to send it to somebody else, and they've got to, break it apart and make it printable, and you got to wait, days, if not weeks, to have them printed before it's even winds up in front of me, so I can then assemble them and to make the model and then get shipped off and get plated. So there's always a longer wait time to have something printed rather than just constructing something on the workbench right now. I would prefer to do it that way, especially with the Hollywood's tight schedule. I mean, you have to be working on something, immediately.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, but do you ever find it a struggle? Because I know that there are situations where you've made sort of custom ships that exist for other people. I can't remember who it was I saw now, so I can't shut them up. But there was somebody that mentioned that was plugging you and bigging you up on, I think it was on Twitter, saying that they'd had you make a model of the Strange New Worlds version of the Enterprise, which obviously there's a similar version that Eagle Moss have made, but it's not accurate to the current show. And they were sort of explaining that you particularly knew exactly what to do to make that source of detail exactly the same. And is that ever really daunting, that you have to match the sort of on screen exactly for people? Or
well, that model did exist as a kit, the 1/1000 scale Strange, not the Strange New Worlds, but there was a Discovery version Enterprise that came out, but it didn't have there's windows that wrap around the front of the bow on the Strange New Worlds version. That's the only thing that they changed significantly. So I just went ahead and had that bow recreated in 3D as an insert, and I just cut off the front of the saucer model and inserted that and lit that from behind, so it looked like a Strange New World Enterprise. But that was probably the toughest thing to make on that kit. But it's the ones I designed for myself. I don't have the kind of Hollywood pressure. This needs to be done tomorrow. I can spend as much time as I want them. So I go through a process where I'm concepting and designing it, and along with the client, approving that design, and then it goes into the development to be printed into components. Those parts are then printed and sent to me, and then I start constructing them, lighting them, and building them out. And this process can take weeks, if not months, to do.
Yeah, I do enjoy. I've been following obviously your work for a while, being a bit of a huge Trekkie and a ship nerd, and I do enjoy watching and seeing at the end of each year when you post like, these are the models that we've worked on over the course of the year, and it's always amazing because there's always at least like 9 or 10 that you've been working on, and I couldn't do it personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my full-time job as a retiree. This is my job. This is what I build. I'm working on the shop 24/7, and it's not a bad gig.
Yeah, definitely.
There's worse things I can be doing.
For sure. Awesome. That's cool. So yeah, talking about like the fact that you were hired to sort of do that work on Picard. As I said, I don't know if you knew in advance that the Titan A would eventually become the new USS Enterprise. But when you found that out, did the weight of that really hit you? Like, wow, I'm now one of a select few who've co-designed the Enterprise.
Yeah, that was a bit of a soft blow. I mean, when you first heard about it, like, wow, that's really? And then it starts to sink in, like, man, the fans are going to be mad.
Certain fans are always mad about something.
They're always mad about something, but it's like,
man.
yeah, the responsibility is like, wow, heavy stuff. But what a group to be part of. I mean, you look back at all the other producers or designers of the Enterprise, and to be part of that list of guys, it's pretty impressive. I mean, to me.
Yeah, I personally love your design. I know that there are some people that are always going to be critical of everything, but as a huge fan of the Shangri-La, I loved the design of the Titan A, and then when it was rechristened as the Enterprise, I was like, that's perfect. I will eventually, if it's ever available, relatively inexpensively, love to have it displayed with the other Enterprise models I've got just over my shoulder here. But
I think it's wonderful if that came out as a kid or something, but
yeah,
not yet.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, the ones that I've seen you've constructed, that you've taken pictures of and everything, are just stunning, just amazing stuff. But yeah.
Eventually, I had time to get the Titan or the Enterprise G model printable, and I was able to do, I think, 2 of those. I built one for Terry, another one for another guy, but and Todd eventually wants one as well as the Titan A. Hopefully this year sometime.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, fair enough. So yeah, I mean, you may have already answered this because you did say you were kind of brought on board specifically for your existing models. Did you know that what they wanted as the Titan A that would become the Enterprise would be an adaptation of the Shangri-La class, or was that something that you came to later?
No, I mean, it was something that was hinted between seasons 2 and 3. Terry had asked if he could buy my Shangri-La model, not knowing that I had sold it previously. So I started to build him another copy of it for himself. And he kind of hinted that he might want to use it for the show. And I was thinking it might have just been used as a background, like prop, like on the desk behind somebody. That would be in the show as a flying starship or even a CGI thing. And then one day I got an email from Dave Blass, the art director, asking if they can see the Shangri-La model that I had been working on for Terry, mocked up with Picard era engines. So now it's starting to dawn on me, like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I had some extra engines from the season 2 of the Stargazer. That was the Picard era engine. So I photoshopped those over place of the existing, TMP era engines of the Shangri-La mock-up that I had, and I sent it over to Dave. And then the next morning, got an email back saying, looks great, we're going to go with it. And at that point, it still was not dawning on me like what this all meant. I mean, in their heads, they were thinking, this is going to be the hero ship for season 3, but they didn't tell me that initially. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then they wanted, of course, the digital files of this thing like right away, which didn't exist because I had hand built this model, scratch built it. There are no blueprints or 3D model, three files of it anywhere. So that Monday morning, I had to take a bunch of photographs of the model and send it to Doug Drexler, and he rebuilt the Shangri-La as best he could based on these photographs I'd taken of the physical model. And he had 1 week to do it, and there was no second pass. There was no going back to change this or that. It's like, got to go, and off it went into production. That's how fast it happened. And so my involvement after mocking it up with the engines was it. That was all they wanted from me. It's like, we're taking the ship and going.
That's fair. Was there anything that you would have changed if you'd had a little bit more time to work on it or not?
Yeah, actually, I had sketching ideas on what might have been what I was thinking might be a second round or a second pass or a third pass, not knowing exactly. Now that I know it was a ship to be used in a 25th century era universe, I'm thinking, well, they're going to want it to change more than just swapping out the engines. So I've been on my own sketching out ideas. And when I first got started, to get the first drafts back from Doug of what he was creating digitally, I was sending him sketches. And they were like, no, we're fine. We don't need any more work. I'm like, really? You're going to go with, okay.
Yeah.
So
I think I remember reading somewhere. I think that's basically because of Terry Metallis's love of the Constitution class refit I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, he just liked the Shangri-La so much as it was. He really didn't want to do much more to it, which was fine. And I think that's great. I mean, I'm proud that he really liked the Shangri-La that well, that was good as is. So I would have wanted to see a little bit more tweaked, more futuristically on the ship, just to make it stand out as its own. But there was very little time to even do that, because they needed to get this thing to production. They needed to create all the LCARs for all the on-screen graphics so they could be shooting on the set. So there was very little time to get the ship, ready, I think. I mean, they spent probably 2 or 3 months to build the Sagan for season 2, which you see like in 2 shots in like 2 episodes of season 2. And here's a ship that's the hero ship. And every single episode of season 3, we had a week to do it. And that's Hollywood. You gotta,
Yeah, exactly. Well, I do look forward to. I'm sure you'll probably be working on in your spare time, artwork or model versions of what a more advanced, upgraded 25th century version might look like.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, because I would do exactly the same, to be honest. You'd never finished, and it's always a question of what if it went in for a refit, and then if it had its new component or whatever. So sure. I can definitely see how that would be something that would be a fun hobby, Cool. And of course, we've talked a lot about the Shangri-La class, but you did mention as well that the Duderstadt class, represented primarily by the USS Intrepid, is another of your designs, although it was obviously based on a pre-existing design that you adapted. Did you know that was going to be part of Picard Season 3 as well?
Oh, yes. That was another design that when I was finished with it, when I thought I was finished working on Picard, I went back to my old WASP design. I'd been working on for many years a TOS predecessor design of the WASP, and I was just doing it for fun. I had been working off and on it, and I had been posting kind of like some concept work of a TOS version of the WASP. And Terry saw it. I go, "Oh, I have an idea for this ship for the show." So he and I worked back and forth, just I think through texting on Instagram, on developing and making this WASP version into a Picard era version of the WASP. And again, adding those extra engines and really streamlining the look, bringing the TOS version another 200 years, the other direction, or 100 years, until Dave found about, hey, I hear you're working on this model with Terry. Can we have the digital file? I go, yes, I have a digital model of what I was calling the Chaparral class. Which is what I was calling my TOS version at the time. And that name kind of stuck with it throughout production. They gave it to Doug, and he did this thing, and he kind of fleshed it out and made it into what was then called the Duderstadt class. But prior to that, it had been, I think, also called a Dayton class, named for Richard Dayton, who built the model of the original Enterprise for the 1960s series. So that was we spent almost a month or 2 working on that, far longer for that ship, which is in one episode. Actually, you see it, I think, in a couple other ones, but as other ships.
Just some good shots, yeah.
That was a fun design, yeah.
It looks, I'll be honest, a lot more 25th century. Certainly, the saucer looks heavily adapted from the original WASP interceptor.
That was from the ground up. Since I knew that this was going to be in the 25th century, I made sure that it looked nothing like a TOS anything. So it had a whole new primary hull, new engines, new pylons. Everything was brand new about it, and so it fit the era, I thought.
Yeah, another gorgeous design, though. I think it was another one when, as soon as we saw it on screen, anytime we see a new ship, we get excited. Being ship nerds, and seeing that was kind of like, oh wow, awesome! Oh, yeah. And then, as you say, seeing it at actual detailed angles and things rather than just a fleeting pass is always appreciated, so you can really get a sense of it. So, as you say, that's why you've obviously got to have detailed files of these things, because people are going to scrutinize it, I guess.
Yeah, it was such a great shot when the Titan and the Intrepid are facing head to head. It's like on screen, there's both of my ships, Shangri-La and WASP, now at 100 years in the future as the Titan and Intrepid on screens. Like that was
a beautifully shot scene as well. The way that the Intrepid just looks angry, the way it bows down on it.
I think that's why he selected that design. It's because it looks aggressive. It has that kind of like an eagle in flight with this tail on sticking out.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Cool. So do you have a next big modeling project you'll be working on? And do you have any plans to work on any more kind of TV Star Trek or anything big like that you can talk about?
Well, I have a list of client commission work that I've been working on, and it's extends through next year and beyond. So the next project is a larger scale, a Radiant class, which I designed for Picard season 2, the first Stargazer. And this one is the Lysander. And it's a good 30-inch long, fully lit model, not gold plated, but this is for a client. And then following that would be a TOS version of the Intrepid, or the Chaparral, or the Wasp. So that'll also be large, and that's next in line. And Terry, of course, wants his own Intrepid, so that's after that. And then there's a long list of guys that are waiting basically for the next project, filling out my schedule for the rest of the year. So it's back to back.
I will say it always looks fantastic, the work. So I love your designs. I think the craftsmanship is obvious. It's just exquisite. And I've basically just done it for you, but would you like to plug anything to our listeners where they can kind of find your work or anything like that?
Well, I'm on Facebook. This is Bill Krause. I'm on Instagram, and it's Threads. I think I'm Admiral Buck on Instagram. I'm Buck Admiral on Twitter, although I've not been using that lately. That's about much it.
Cool. I won't keep you any longer because I know that you've had a busy morning and everything, but just one last question, and it is the big one. Do you have a favorite ship in the Trek franchise?
It's hard not to like the refit from the motion picture, because that, I think, is what really got me going in Starships, because it was what made Starships real for me. So that was the inspiration, I think, to design things, and in the level of detail that you would add to a starship, either physically or modeling with a model, or even digitally. I mean, that was what set the standard. So as a favorite, that's probably it. But there are a lot of, there's so many ships out there that you can look at and go, I love that, I love that, I love that, I love that. You just can't really pick one.
Oh, it's a big question, absolutely. But I think you're among similar here, because we always see, I think it's the refit that's our ultimate, the pinnacle, but we love so many of them. So like I said, we look forward to seeing your designs, and I really do hope that more Star Trek people get in touch, because I love the detail, and I love that people care about these things, background details. It makes a big difference to the fans, and so on behalf of all the fans, just thank you. And as I said, I love the designs. Other people might not. That's their prerogative. But thank you for designing a great USS Enterprise, frankly.
Thank you very much.
And that's great. Well, I will let you go and enjoy the rest of your day, sir, and live long and prosper.
You as well.
Take care. Bye.
Right. Thanks again to Bill for agreeing to sit down and chat with me there for half an hour or so. It was a fantastic interview. I really did enjoy it, and I enjoyed geeking out about Starships, my passion, as you can probably tell. So it was fun for me, and I learned quite a little bit as well. And I will say I'm going to leave all of the links to Bill's various social medias in the episode description. So do check that out. I thoroughly recommend, if you haven't already, following him on Twitter, Instagram, all these places. His portfolios are fantastic just to look through for Starship nerds like myself. You can see all of his work, whether it be models of existing ships or the newer ones. And I will leave a link to the actual Tycho Yards website as well. Again, check that out if you can. There's some great stuff on there. And if you can afford it, maybe, see if you can get one for yourself for one of these fantastic model ships. There's a lot of effort and heart and passion definitely goes into these, and they're pretty incredible. So, as I say, thanks again. If you have sat through this and listened to it, for joining us. Hopefully, we'll be bringing you some more interviews like this. That is basically the intention. If you've enjoyed this, please check out our interview with the Star Trek Picard production designer, Dave Blass, which we conducted just after the end of season 2. We haven't had a chance, unfortunately, to touch base regarding the season 3 secrets, but we do talk a lot about the sort of the inception of the new USS Stargazer, the Sagan class, and the various things that would be introduced in the second season of Picard. And I think it's an interesting and quite actually a long, informative interview, that one. So hopefully that's going to be something you would enjoy. And stick around. We are going to be back here with an actual series of the podcast very soon. Mid-February, I believe, is the launch date, and that's going to be our series reviewing various Romulan-themed episodes. So do stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, you can also find all of our information, as always, in the episode descriptions. If you are so inclined, we would be very grateful if you wanted to leave us any kind of donation on our coffee page, on Buy Us a Coffee, just to help keep things ticking over, keep the lights on with the podcast. And you can always find us on social media. Hit us up anytime to talk anything Star Trek, anything geeky. And in particular, if you can find me on there, I'm happy to discuss my favorite Starship designs. And, hopefully we'll get some more Starship models soon, because it's not like I don't have enough. So in the meantime, of course, you all know the drill. So, remember, we are Starfleet. Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.
You have been listening to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast, hosted by Michael Wilson and DK. Produced and edited by Mike Wilson. Additional material by DK. Please remember to like this episode and spread it throughout subspace. Subscribe to the Hit or Miss YouTube channel and follow us online. Links to all of our social media pages can be found via the link tree listed in the episode's description. For any queries or to apply to be a guest on the show, you can also email homstartrek@gmail.com. This podcast is part of the Mike's Podcasts Network. You can listen to this and our sister podcasts on all good podcast providers by searching for Mike's Podcasts. Hit or Miss Podcast was based on an idea by Michael Wilson and Will Templar. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll be back, but for now, hailing frequencies closed.